Well, after almost 7 years of living a nightmare, Marissa Alexander is free. The Jacksonville, Florida woman was sentenced to 20 years in prison for firing a gunshot that didn't injure anyone. After years of legal battles, Alexander has served her time and now wants to serve others. WIS's Megan Norman sat down with Alexander for an exclusive interview.
Well, Marissa Alexander's father lives in Colombia, and I spoke with him almost 5 years ago now when the family was really in the midst of this crisis, wondering if his daughter was going to spend decades of her life in prison. Now she is sharing her story as she works to finally close this chapter and move on.
I did the best that I could that day.
Marissa Alexander reflects on the day in August 2010 that changed her life.
I tried to avoid the situation that day as best I could. I locked myself in the bathroom, and that wasn't enough.
She says her husband at the time beat her and was getting ready to do it again when she grabbed her gun and fired a single shot in the air. Did you think you had done anything wrong?
No. I sure didn't. I was really surprised when I got arrested. I was really surprised. I mean, and I didn't feel the need to hide anything, so when the police asked me questions, I told them what happened.
No one was hurt.
I felt very justified in what I did. I had no idea that I would be arrested and charged.
Charged with aggravated assault, a Florida judge did not let her use a stand-your-ground defense.
At that point, I realized it was something bigger than me. I realized that prior to even going to trial. I knew that this just didn't make sense.
Fast forward to her trial in May of 2012. It took a jury 12 minutes to convict, sentenced to 20 years.
It was just a matter of wait and see. I always knew that I was not going to do 20 years. I just didn't know how and when it was going to work itself out.
She spent another year in jail until an appellate court overturned her conviction and granted Alexander a new trial. Now facing the possibility of 60 years in prison, she opted for a plea deal, which meant 3 years in jail and 2 years house arrest with ankle monitoring.
I was at a position where there was no amount of money, no amount of influence, or anything else that could help me but God. Like, I had to rely on something much greater than myself to get through that.
She is college educated with a master's degree. Had a good job, a family, no criminal record. So being confined to a cell was an experience like no other.
I kept my back against the wall, my eyes open, my mouth shut, and my ears open, and I just listened.
She had to deal with being separated from her children, twins, a boy and girl who were now 16, and a 6-year-old daughter who was only 9 days old when the incident happened.
I wrote them a lot. And I would send envelopes so that they could write me back if they wanted to. I just didn't want to force it, but I was able to talk to them for the most part, and we were able to visit. So that relationship, you know, maintained. It was pretty good. The baby that was a difficult one.
Now, reunited with her children and her family in Colombia, Alexander is writing a new chapter.
I have a nonprofit, and it's Marissa Alexander Justice Project, and it's, you know, MAJP. And essentially, my areas of focus is domestic violence, the criminalization of domestic violence victims, and then I go into mass incarceration, sentencing reform, criminal policy reform, because I believe those things they all touched me.
She also wants to start a shelter for women.
A very safe, non-judgmental, shameless space for people to come in and get healing and then be able to move on. If I had that type of anger and animosity and hatred during this journey, there's no way I could have survived. You know what I mean? Like, it's too much energy. I needed every energy to be positive in order for me to get through it, because it's the most difficult thing I have ever had to experience.
Now, Florida is one of 24 states with a stand-your-ground law, including South Carolina. After Alexander's case, laws in Florida are changing. She was sentenced to an automatic 20 years initially because her charge of aggravated assault was one of a number of crimes with a mandatory minimum. Now that charge has been removed from that list of crimes.
Well, I know a lot of people stepped up to advocate justice on her behalf, and she really is on a mission now to share her story, traveling all around the country and also writing a book.
Right. She's going to different college campuses across the country and writing maybe one of 2 books, possibly at this point, to share her story. The Marissa before all of this went down, and then now after, life after prison.
Wow, an incredible story to tell, and so appropriate that on your last night with us at WIS, another great, insightful story from our Megan Norman. We will certainly miss having you as a part of the WIS team.
I will miss you, Judy, and all of the viewers.
Thank you, Megan.